welcome to the club. You've been a part of this club for a while now.
I'm part of the club.
Welcome to Ex-Homeschoolers Club. You've been like one of my best friends for the longest time. We've known each other since we were like 10 or 11, something like that. We met at AWANA's, and is it
Classic.
AWANA or is it AWANA's?
I don't know. Does it exist anymore? Who knows?
Good question. Good question. If anyone doesn't know what it is, it basically was like Bible Boy Scouts, Bible Boy and Girl
Literally,
Scouts.
that's such a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, like during the middle of the week, and yeah, we would like learn scripture and like recite scripture and get merit badge type stuff and do Pinewood Derby and play games and but it was like co-ed. It was like boys and girls together. So anyway, I know that's how we met originally. I think, right?
I honestly don't remember meeting you there.
No?
I remember. I really don't remember where we met. I just assume I have a bad memory, but I just assume I met all of my homeschool friends at like park days or like co-op meetings. But I don't have like a specific memory of where I met most people.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could have been Awana's. I mean, it probably was Awana's, honestly.
Yeah.
I guess
I
that's
feel like
where
that
I
was
met
a big
some homeschoolers.
That was a big hub for like a lot of the homeschool community. Was like, because it was like local and at a church, and of course everybody loved church. But we like have known each other for what? It's like almost like 18 years at this point.
Something like that.
Something like that. We're heading into 30s soon.
Can't wait.
I can't wait. Full-fledged adults. But yeah, well, I'm glad you're here. And
me too.
So tell me a little bit about like being a homeschool kid. Like, were you homeschooled all the way through? I know you've got siblings. Were they also homeschooled all the way through? Do you know why your parents decided to homeschool you? That kind of stuff. Like, tell us a little bit about like growing up as a homeschool kid.
That's good. Yes, homeschooled my entire life. And I think all my siblings were, but it kind of depends on how you define homeschooling, because I was homeschooled for every grade, right?
Right.
So I did all of them, but then some of my siblings and friends just stopped doing school at home at like 14 or 15 and just started going to college. And so I don't know if you would consider them being homeschooled like their whole lives, because like for high school, they weren't homeschooled. They were college schooled.
Right. You know, they were like geniuses. So they, tested out of everything. I was not a genius. I also went. I didn't go all the way through. I did second grade through high school, but so I did have a
I didn't know that.
I had a taste of like regular school life. So those first couple years of homeschooling were super tough for me, because I already knew what it was like to be around your friends every day and like go to class and then go to lunch and go do all these different things. And so then all of a sudden it was just like, I'm at home all day long with my mom. We were renovating the house, kind of a thing. So it was like just not a conducive place to be like learning. And my mom wanted to like kill us all the time. And like, it was just stressful. It was just like stressful life stuff going on at all periods. Right. And so then she started meeting parents like your parents and other homeschool parents, and they like seemed so much more like together with like, oh yeah, we have this structure and this plan. And maybe that's not the reality of what was going on, but it seemed so much more structured. And then, and then we started being friends, right? So then it's like, okay, now I don't feel alone anymore. Like I have kind of a classroom experience again to some degree.
Yep. So homeschooled my whole life, siblings, homeschooled / college. And technically I did go to college for the last semester of my senior year. So I did half of my senior year, and then I did some school at home for the last half of that senior year. And then some of my classes were at a college. So kind of half and half, but it was really just for one semester when I was 17. And that was traumatic, but it was good still too. Like I needed it to happen. But yeah, a little bit traumatic. And then why I was homeschooled, I really have never asked my parents that question. I would assume for several different reasons. My grandparents started one of the most popular homeschooling schools back in the 70s or 80s or something like that.
Okay.
So they were like the pioneers of homeschooling, like down in San Diego, LA area. Grace Christian School is the school they started, and it's like still around today. That was like their main job, is they just managed a giant co-op of like curriculum and students all over, I guess, the Southern California area. And other people, I think, like were a part of it too outside of California, but majority I think was in California. I don't really know how it works. Never really asked a lot of questions because I've never really been super interested in that. But yeah, so my mom was homeschooled, and then I guess my parents, from what I know, they just talked about it and they're like, yeah, like based off of some religious ideas as well as some social biases. Um, on top of, I have dyslexia and I was the first child, so I think they went that route because of that. Um, just some of my struggles as like a 4 or 5 year old, they decided to homeschool. But again, I've never like directly asked them, but I think that's mostly why. And I think that's a pretty familiar sentiment for most parents that homeschooled around that time, were for a mix of some of those reasons.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like I feel like in talking to friends, and then like as I've been prepping to do this podcast, and like talking to my folks and other homeschool parents, it's like, why did you do this? Like, and it tends to be religion, and
Mm,
also my child has. I hate to say a learning disability, but I mean that is what it's labeled, but it's a
mhm.
learning difference, right? And so putting them in a traditional classroom is just not going to be conducive to them actually being the smart person that they are, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy that your I didn't know your mom was homeschooled, and, and that
Mhm,
your grandparents kinda, like, not pushed her into that, but, like, had raised her in that, and then had done the school. Because my grandparents were kind of the catalyst for my parents even thinking about homeschooling. Because my
mm,
grandma was just very obsessed with this idea of, like, "Hey, you need to bring education to your house, you need to all these things," and so she would send my mom, like, books and articles and all this stuff, and my mom was like, "Why would I ever wanna do that?" Like, I have like, you send the kids off to school, they go to school, I get to do my thing, I get to watch Oprah, and then the kids come
boom.
home, and then, we go grocery shopping, whatever. And so, yeah, so that shift for her was, like, really hard because she had never done that before, she was,
Mm,
um even though she had gone to school to be a teacher,
mm.
she was like, at that point, she was like, "I'm not gonna teach. Like, this is, I'm stay-at-home mom. That's my job." So
Interesting.
you
Wow.
have 3 siblings,
Mm,
and so, like, and you guys are spaced out pretty decent, right? I mean,
mhm.
there's what, like, a 3-year gap between each of you, roughly?
Yeah, I mean, something like that between each of them, more or less. A year and a half between me and my sister, and then the gap gets bigger from there between
Okay.
each child.
So,
Yeah.
let me ask you this, because like, I know, because my sister and I are 3 years apart, and there were certain points where I feel like we were doing, like, the same schoolwork. Was that, like, true in your house too, where it was like, we're, like, all in the same class? Like, yeah, there are certain things, like, usually with things like math, right, you're maybe at a higher level the older you are, but, like, other things, it was like, we're just all at the same level. Was that kind of a reality at your house?
There's definitely some aspects of that. Like if there's, you're gonna go on a nature walk together and learn about biology or
Right.
something like that. Like you're gonna go together so that you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. When it came to a lot of the curriculum, like you said, on the more, I guess, strenuous topics like math and history and stuff, it would usually be separate. But there was some like social studies stuff that was together, home economics stuff that was together. I guess things you could just teach kids together. They were together, especially with me and my sister only being 1 or 2 grades apart at a time. Uh, yeah, it would sometimes overlap because we
Right.
weren't. It was hard. Like we weren't just one grade necessarily. Like we would be different grades in different subjects based off of where we tested at. That's like how the school did it. So like if you excelled in one area, you were like a higher grade in that area, and if you like needed help in a different area, you would just be lower.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were in different places, I guess, at times. But so some stuff we do together, most stuff we wouldn't do together. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I feel you. Yeah, because it was the same at my house. Yeah, there was certain,
Mm.
yeah, nature walk, or we're gonna go do this. It's like, yeah, you're all together, and then, yeah, same deal. It's like, if you're dumb in this area, I don't want to say dumb. If you were lower in this level, like, you just
Yeah,
sat where you sat, right? It's just like you
yeah.
just made it happen. And it wasn't until really high school where my parents were like, "No, you got to be like at these levels," right? It's like,
Mhm.
high school is a set predetermined, like you're gonna do algebra 2, geometry, kind of a thing, and these specific sciences. That was mostly because I was heading towards college, and so it was like I needed those things to get into college, right?
Right.
And that's what I think one of the things a lot of people worry about with like their kids is like like can a homeschool kid get into college? The answer is obviously yes. We both went to college.
Yeah.
So obviously yes, and we're both brilliant. Not to toot our own horns, but
Geniuses.
we're geniuses. Absolutely. Yeah.
Making tons of money.
We could definitely put a man on the moon if we tried hard enough.
If you had enough money. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have enough money. Yeah. I mean, we bring back NASA. It's not a problem.
Easy.
Did you ever have an experience? Let me phrase it like this. Did you ever have an experience where you kind of realized, like, I'm a homeschool kid and like I'm the weird one out, where you're like, maybe you're around non-homeschool kids, public school kids, whatever, and you realize like, oh shoot, like I'm the odd man out in this situation. Like I'm the weirdo.
I think that was the most real lived experience of my entire like childhood, all of the time. Like it was the main thing that I was concerned with all of the time. Let me think about the first time I ever experienced that, because I would experience that weekly.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't have to be the first time, but I just remember like even getting to college, I quit telling people that I was a homeschool kid because I instantly got the like, oh, that makes sense. And I was like, I hated that answer, right? It's like, because then you're like, I already feel so self-conscious, right? And then you tell somebody this thing about yourself, and then they're like, oh, well, yeah, that checks out. Like you're a weirdo,
The thing is, there are homeschoolers. Like there's people I meet, and it's so easy to smell a homeschooler. Like,
yeah,
I've met so many people, and I feel like I'm so good at guessing who's homeschooled and who's not. They can be completely normal, like wearing completely normal clothes, acting normally. It just, there's something that happens to you when you're homeschooled that you forever just smell that way to people. And so I'll meet people from just across the world, and I'd be like, you were homeschooled, weren't you? And I'd be like, how did you know? I was like, I don't know how I knew. Like, you could just tell. But there are public school kids that smell like that a little bit, for different reasons. But anyways, back on track a little bit. I think when I was 6 or 7, and the main thing for me, I think that I felt differentiated in wasn't necessarily that I was a homeschooler, but more so was that I struggled reading at like a really young age. And so when everybody else was like able to read, I was like, 6 or 7 or whatever, and I just struggled with it a lot. And I think in my mind, just as I'm thinking, the first time I felt that way, I was 5 or 6 and was still like struggling like to grasp some of the elementary like concepts of reading. And I had this like workbook I was going through, and all I had to do was read the sentences on one page, and that would take me probably like half an hour or something like that, like a long time. And I remember I had a friend who was 2 years older than me that like lived on my block, and he would come over and he'd be like, can Derry play right now? Which is also kind of strange for like a 9-year-old to be asking a 6-year-old to play, but whatever. I guess not that weird. So he would ask me to play, and I'd be like, I can't. Like, I have to work on this like page I'm reading. And he'd be like, well, let me do it for you. And he'd just like read it in like a minute, and I'd be like, awesome. Like, I can't do that.
Right. You feel dumb, right? You're just like, oh shoot, you know.
Part of it was that he was older, but when you're 6, like you can't really differentiate age that well. It's just mostly on skill, and you're like, frick, I just don't have the skill that everybody else does. And so there was that aspect. But of course, there's kids that they realize you're homeschooled because you just don't know what social norms are most of the time. You have like just a built-in autism that is just automatic, that I don't know. And you just don't know social cues. So there's definitely a period where you think things are normal because you just grew up with your parents and maybe your friends in your neighborhood, and then you go to church or camp or some social event and you meet other kids, and they immediately know you're weird, and they're kids. They tell you immediately that you're weird, and you're like, oh my God, like my worldview is falling apart. I don't know what
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
And
No,
then
100%.
so I had that pretty young, and the reading thing combined with just not being super socially adept at the beginning created like a hyper fixation with having to be accepted so that I could be loved in me. And I think I became pretty normal, but I became pretty normal because I had massive amounts of anxiety about being normal every day. And I don't know why that was, just projection at a young age from kids that wanted to be my friends or something like that. I
I
don't know where it
totally
really stems from.
I totally agree with that, and I understand that because, like I said, when I got to college, I had a couple people be like, they could sniff it out, right? And that had happened
Mhm.
before. Like people had been like, "Oh, well, yeah, you're obviously a homeschool kid." And thankfully, I had a professor who sat me down and was just like, "Yo, you got to learn to chill out." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "You just got to be a good hang. Like, just know how to just be in the room and just like listen and be cool and like." Don't be the pick me, like just be there.
Mm,
Like, you're too cool for school kind of a thing.
dang.
And that was a big shift for me because like you said, as a homeschool kid, like you want when you get to those events that are like a church event or camp or whatever, and all the other kids already know each other because they all go to school together. They're all friends and they automatically pick you out as the weird one because they've never seen you before, right? And then they're
Yeah.
like, "Well, why have I never seen you at school?" "Well, because I do school at home." "Well, why do you do school at home?" "Well, that's weird."
Mhm.
And right, and so if you can learn to kind of like just be cool and exist in that, universe, it's it gets easier. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
It gets so much
Yeah,
easier. And
it
one of the
does.
things that I think was good by the time we were like in high school, junior high too, was that there was a lot more community within the homeschool
Mm.
like group. Like I don't know if it was this way for you or not, but like in the early years of being a homeschool kid, it's a lot of isolation, at least for me it was, where we're just at home for like days at a time, and
Yeah.
go grocery shopping. But there's no friends. There's the kid on the block, but like you don't have friends, you don't have other kids who relate to you in any way. But by the time
Mhm.
we were in high school, it was like, okay, the homeschool community in our hometown like was big. It was thriving.
It was huge,
It was
honestly.
huge. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
huge. Yeah, I talked to kids who, yeah, they had nothing, and they grew up in like a farm town or something, and it's like
Right.
for them to have friends is like ridiculously hard. Where it's like we lived 5 minutes down the street from each other. Like
Yeah.
once we got a
Well,
driver's license, it's like we just come over.
yeah, exactly. That's crazy. Speaking of the, I guess, learning how to be normal in social situations, I this has got to be the perfect example of what you're talking about. Um, I guess combining actually the last two things you talked about. I was in Thailand one time, and there was this kid that was the son of like a missionary that was there, and I wasn't staying with them or I didn't know them, nothing, right? I was just in a hotel. Like, it was in a hotel lobby. And I guess this kid's a white kid, and I was a white person in Thailand by myself. And so I'm just sitting in the lobby at at 12:30 p.m. Sorry, a.m. Like at night, like in the middle of the night. I'm just like watching a YouTube video. There's nobody else there. And this kid like comes down or like comes in the room, and there's like a few chairs in this lobby or whatever, and he sees me and walks directly over and sits down across from me and stares directly at me, and I felt like he was going to try to kill me or something like that. Like, it's the middle of the night and this like 12-year-old just has all the confidence in the world and is just sitting across from me, like he doesn't know who I am and we're in a foreign country. Like, he just has all this confidence, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I had headphones inside, like take a headphone out. I was like, "I'm watching YouTube." And he goes, "You would be watching YouTube, wouldn't you?" And I was like, "All right." So I put my headphone back in and I try my best to ignore him. But eventually we started talking, and he's just a homeschool kid who lives there. He's like there from China or something. But just like the sheer, like, just they have no idea how to
Yeah.
act. And you either have that stupid confidence where you just can't be normal and no one wants to be around you because you have so much confidence, or you're so anxiety ridden that you can't speak at all. like
Yeah.
the two extremes, of course. But I meet people like that all the time. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
honestly stresses me out. But because we grew up in it too, there's so much understanding and empathy and grace for those who are struggling with it still.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know a homeschool family here that I've started like connecting with a little bit. And I picked them out of the crowd so fast. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I understand and I relate and like let me go talk to you and like be your friend and stuff because
Awesome.
it's not a like let me white knight my way into your life and save you or whatever, but like
Mhm.
the goal of this show and the goal of having conversations like this is like one, it's so funny to like talk about growing up and like, talk about the awkwardness and all those things, but like
Mm.
it gets better, right? And so
Yeah.
the goal is that there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? There's the good stuff that happened from being homeschooled, like the ability to go to college early, right? Like the
Mhm.
ability to, have close relationships with family and friends during times when normally you would be in a school environment, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's the bad stuff for some people where it's like mom and dad really had no idea what they were doing and they were just kind of like winging it and hoping
Figuring it
that
out.
we were smart enough to catch on, and then of course there's sometimes the ugly of like the traumatic, like you said, anxiety of
Mm.
like I need to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
I had that too. I looking back, I still have that, and that's like a
Oh yeah.
trauma piece that we carry with us and we, you know, when we go into a room, it's like if no one's talking to me, like I'm the odd man out. That's just the
Yeah.
reality of like how I walk into a room is I know I'm the odd person out automatically.
Hmm.
Everyone else in here is normal. And it's not until you kind of put yourself out there and have that confidence to go, just go talk to somebody. Um, you mentioned kind of like growing up with dyslexia and like being at a young age and like the neighbor kid comes over and he just reads it and you're like, I feel
Hmm.
stupid. Like, I feel so dumb. So, like, and we talked a little bit about like mom and dad potentially picking homeschooling as a way to kind of like, you know, give you an education that was more tailored towards that struggle. So, talk a little bit about that. Like, talk about some of like the struggle, but like, what are like tips and tricks that you've learned like to kind of like combat that and like because I'm not dyslexic, so the
Hmm.
way that people explain it to me is that like if you look at a page in a book it's just like moving letters basically, and maybe that's not super accurate, but like flipping certain letters to have other sounds and things like that. And so, is there anything out there that's like helped you kind of, because you're an adult, you live on your own, you
Hmm.
totally sufficient. Um, yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. First off, there's, from my knowledge, I had a specialist tell me this one time. That's the only thing I'm going off of. They said that there's hundreds of different types of dyslexia. It's technically just a coding issue with your mind, like how fast or how different you decode shapes. And so that's why you can get it with like numbers and stuff too, dyscalculia or whatever the name is. Um, but I don't necessarily see the letters moving around the page. I just have a really hard time like focusing like on certain words and like getting the meaning from them. So it just takes me a lot longer to like decode the meaning specifically just from letters. Which is weird because like I'm really good like at geometry. Like I did when I was homeschooled, I did geometry in like 2 months. Like I just
Hmm.
finished it super fast. So it's not necessarily like all like shapes or symbols are hard for me to decode, but just specifically words for some reason because I was also good at math and stuff growing up and in college. Anyways, so that's just I guess my type of dyslexia. Things that help me. I mean, I really don't know if homeschooling helped me. I think it did give me some like space to breathe and grow and try to like learn on my own without the pressure of like kids around me making fun of me as much. But at the same time, I just thought I was stupid for my whole life until I got to college. And then as soon as I got to college and like just started getting A's and stuff in my classes, I was like, oh, like because I had to work so much harder at learning this thing, I just have a way better work ethic when it comes to school. So I'm just actually trying in these classes when no one else is really and getting good grades because I'm trying harder, not necessarily because I'm like way smarter. And so I don't know. I don't know necessarily what helped me and what didn't help me. Would I have been the same person if I went to public school? Maybe I would have had different types of help. Maybe I would have felt way more self-conscious and not tried at all and just thought I was stupid and never have gone to college. Like, I don't know what the outcome of that would have been. I think for me, homeschooling was helpful, but at the same time, you can get away with a lot when you're homeschooled. And so it's really hard, like to work on something you're bad at. And so when you're not absolutely forced to do stuff, you're just not going to work very hard on it. But that also applies in public school. Like
Yeah.
nowadays, I work in public schools like 3 days a week, and kids will, like, teachers are just passing kids even if they do zero work. Like, they just don't want them in their grade next year, and so they're just passing them. And so they can just skip by and not do anything anyway. So I really don't know if
Yeah.
normal, like, public school, private school would have been better for me than homeschool. I think pros and cons necessarily. When it comes to, like, what could other kids do that, like, have those learning disabilities, on the homeschooling side, I think if your parents know what they're doing, which I think mine had a pretty good idea, you can get some help. Usually there's specialists that you can go to for both public and private school and homeschool kids that can help a lot too. Nowadays, there's so much more information for people than there was when we were growing up that you could just watch a YouTube video. Like, your parents can be so much more informed about how to teach you now that, like, if my mom could just watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos about what dyslexia is like when I was 5, like, it'd be so much easier for me and so much easier for her now homeschooling me, you know? So there are a ton more advantages for parents if they're, on it, as teachers of their kids in homeschool to, like, do a good job. Are they going to
Yeah.
do that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So I'm
That's
not
a good
sure.
point. Like you bring up like the idea of like parents being involved in education. And I think that's a big
Mm,
thing that we're seeing. There's a lot of debates around like school right now, right? Of like
mm,
books are getting banned. This country is like, our education policies are not great in this country, to say the least. I live in a really terrible state. Our education is like one of the lowest. Like we're in the 40s when it comes to like
nice.
education levels. Um, yeah. So, but I always like when I talk to people who are thinking about homeschooling their kids, I'm like, you as the parent are like, you want to be heavily involved. So like
Mm,
even if your kid goes to public school, like having parents who are involved in your education is super helpful, right? It's super they
mhm,
care it's them showing like I care about you as a kid, right? And like we both had parents like that, right? Who were like when we struggled with something, how do we fix this? How do we get
yeah.
you to understand this, right? So let's try this method. Let's do this. And that's I think why the beauty of like if you do have a learning disability like dyslexia, like ADD, like ADHD, right?
Mm,
Because it's more of a one-on-one approach with homeschool kids, there's like your parents have the ability to be like, okay, this isn't working, so let's just change the method. If you're in a
yeah.
public school room with 12 to 20 to 30 kids, the teacher does not have the time to do that. They are juggling way too much, right? And
Yeah.
um, so even if your kid does have to go to public school, being able to take time at home with them to like sit down and be like, okay, why are you struggling in this area? Let's get you the help you need.
Mhm,
Super important. You graduated early from high school, so you're a genius. We've already established this. And you went to college. Tell me about your college experience because yours is a little bit different than mine. I left
mm,
immediately after high school, moved to college, did college in 3 years
mm,
and walked away with a degree. I know your path went a little bit different and you like did career for a while and like different things like
mhm,
that. So like talk about that and talk about like wanting because you just graduated with a bachelor's degree. So like,
mhm.
congratulations first of all. But talk
Thanks.
about like the decision to do that.
Yeah. So in high school, started college, and that was really such a big turning point for me in my life because I went from thinking I was dumb and not like wanting to do school at all, not wanting to go to college, anything like that, to just doing it for the last semester of my high school experience. And after the first or second day, can't remember, I was only taking 2 classes. I had an art class that was 6 hours long on Friday morning, and I wanted to end it all every class. And I was terrible at drawing also. And I had a math class, and I walked out of the second math class because the first one was just like an intro slash syllabus or something, and literally cried. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an idiot. Like, I don't know how to learn. Like, this is so overwhelming. I also didn't realize that college, because I went to a community college, was going to be like half like high school graduates, half like military slash moms slash anybody else that wanted to go to school. And so I just wasn't ready for the demographics. I wasn't ready for the content. And my mom was like, you can quit, like just stick it out until like the drop date and like see how you do. And I was like, I really don't want to do that, but I guess I'll humiliate myself for like a month just to, I guess, see where it goes. And so I did. And after a month, I realized everybody else knew just as much as I did in the class, and that's why they were there. And I was like, oh, I don't have to just know this, like going into it. And so I realized I was just there to learn, like, and I can learn. I just have to take the pressure off myself. And like, I started to gain confidence in myself as, I'd take a test and I wouldn't fail it. And I would do my homework and I would do a good job and I'd get A's and B's and stuff like that. And I finished the class and got an A. And like, as soon as I did that, I was like, holy crap, like maybe I'm not who I thought I was, because I was just living life academically in a vacuum of just me and the computer or me and my parents, depending on, whatever subject I was doing. So that was a huge like confidence boost, and honestly, like almost like personality changer, mostly based off of confidence for me, and realizing I wasn't dumb, and I could learn. And I really started to love learning at that point, and just like started learning as much as I could in a lot of different areas. And college was fun. In 3 years, or no, in 2.5 years, I got a couple different associate's degrees, one in psychology, one in communications. And then I quit and started working for YWAM for 7 years or something. And then the last 3 years, I've just gone to school at night, and I've just done school asynchronously. And so all of the pain that all of the current high schoolers are feeling of going to school over Zoom and stuff for a while, I can also empathize with. It is not a good way to learn in any shape or form in my mind, but it does allow you to get somewhat of an education on your own time, which is really helpful for a lot of people, because I couldn't have gotten a degree just like working normal hours. I can't go to school, right? So that was really helpful. Just graduated, all that kind of stuff. Really thankful for it, and that I was able to do it and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, education is so strange at different ages of life, because when you're, at least for me, and this is my experience that I've seen with a lot of kids, just no one wants to do school when you're young. Like you just can't wait till it's over. You're like, I just can't wait till either the day is over and I can do whatever I want, or summer's here, or I'm finally out of school. Like everybody just wants to quit. And then when you're older, you're like, just get me a podcast so I can learn more, please. Like I just need some time to learn. Can you please just let me not work so I can just learn for a little bit? And it just switches so much. I don't know how to solve that problem, honestly. It just seems so funny to me, the dichotomy of like, once you get out of school and you start working, you just want to learn again, and you just want to do some interesting stuff. And when you're in high school, you're like, please just get me out of here. I just need freedom.
It's what's funny is, and what's funny is that like my parents did this thing where when I got to high school, they would ask me what I wanted to learn about, right? So like this is the other joy of like being a homeschool kid, was that like I got really into World War II. So for a year, I did history that was all World War II based history. I got really into pirates. I did history, all based around pirates. So things like that, right? It's like that's the joy of homeschooling. Not every parent does that, but like you can encourage your kid to like pursue that passion, right? It also goes with like we were both musical people. We did bands together. We were in church band together. Like we had parents that like pushed us to like pursue things we were interested in, whether it was in school or out of school. And so you talk about like, like once you are out in the real world and you have a job, you're like, now I just want to learn. But the things you want to learn about typically are things that you're like, I'm interested in this, where like high school and somewhat of college. I mean, college, you get to decide what you want to study, but after a while, you're kind of like locked in, right? You do 2 years or something. You're like, I might as well just like finish this out. But now we're at a stage where it's like whatever you want to learn, you can go learn it, right? There's any outlet you can go find information,
Mhm.
a course, a book, a podcast, YouTube videos around that thing and learn about it. Homeschooling does a good job of like, I don't know if it was the case for you. It was the case for me that like there were points where my parents would just like hand me a textbook and be like, here, like just do this kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And then it's
Mhm.
all on you to just like figure out like I'm gonna do X amount in this day. You said you did geometry in like 2 months, right? It's like you were
Mhm.
good at it, so you just went ham at it.
Yeah.
But there's that kind of like, I don't know. Did your parents do that at all for you? Like where you were like interested in something and they like maybe not pushed you, but just like encouraged you to be like, oh yeah, pursue that thing, like whether it's education or not.
Most of the academic things that I did when I was in junior high and high school, I have just blacked out of my mind in
I
general,
don't blame you.
just because they weren't important to me then.
Yeah,
So like I learned a lot, but I don't really remember the process of learning. Like I have some images ingrained in my mind. But of course, my parents were super supportive, as most parents are who homeschool their kids. They obviously care about their kids and what they're learning, which is why they're homeschooling them in the first place. Whether or not certain parents do a good job of it, that's left to be said for some of them. But I think my parents did a good job. And yeah, if I was interested in a sport, they let me do it. If I was interested in music, they let me do it. They always wanted me to love what I was doing and stuff. But then there's stuff that you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose if you do math or not. Like you
yeah,
don't get to choose if you write papers or not, for English. Like it's just stuff you got to do. So there is an amount of flexibility. I really can't remember if there was any specific areas I really wanted to learn in or not. I think I mostly was just interested in sports and music and stuff like that I kind of did extracurricularly.
yeah, yeah. I know that. Yeah, tennis was like huge in our hometown.
Hmm.
That was a big one, and I know you
Yeah.
like lifeguarded. And um, I tell people all the time that my sport was airsoft, and that took place at your
Yeah.
house most of the time. So, like, to set the scene, Derry's house growing up, which his parents still live there, it's this beautiful
Mhm.
house. It's on a river. It sometimes that river dries up, but there's like this whole backyard jungle that was just like perfect for like
Mm.
airsoft, paintball, like hide and seek. Like, it was amazing backyard. But we would go play airsoft. I don't know. We played multiple times a month. I know that.
Yeah.
Like at
All
some
the
points,
time.
it was just like every single week.
Yeah. That's all I
And
wanted to do.
yeah, exactly. Just like be outside and like shoot each other with plastic pellets. Like, of course, that sounds
Amazing.
freaking sick.
Yeah.
So, but I always tell people, I'm like, my parents, that was my sport, so they funded it. And I was like, that
Mm.
was my, in the same way they would pay, if I wanted to play football or tennis or
Right.
anything like that. I wanted to play airsoft, so I'd go play airsoft at Derry's house.
Yeah. So much fun. Yeah. Some of the best memories playing airsoft in the backyard. Uh,
Yeah.
have you seen pictures of my backyard recently?
I have not. No.
Dude, unrecognizable.
Okay.
Zero shrubbery,
Oh,
all
no.
rocks. The creek has completely moved like the middle of like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about too much, but it's just completely changed. You got to look at
Right.
pictures. My dad posts on Instagram all the time.
Okay.
It's very different.
I'll check
Yeah,
it out. Yeah.
very
No,
different.
it's so weird to like go back and see people's houses, or like my mom sends me, videos of like us as kids. She just sent me a video of you and I doing our homeschool talent show, and we played a song. I can't
Oh
remember what the
yeah,
song is, but yeah,
home,
Home by Edward Sharp and the Magnetic
something like that.
Zeros, I think.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And it was just fun. She sends it to me like every year when it pops up on her timeline of
Mm,
just like, oh yeah,
that's
remember
awesome.
this? And so yeah, you and I were in a couple different bands together. I know that.
Yeah, I just saw a picture on my Google Photos that came up the other day, and it was you and me sitting outside of a hotel. We just got dropped off by our parents to get picked up by other parents, and we had like a bass guitar and an amp and another guitar. I have no idea what show or something we just played, but yeah, we did some music together. Some
Yeah,
fun times.
I remember too. Do you remember this? There is a Ford dealer in Fillmore, and Brandon Burns, who's going to come on the podcast, he got us a gig,
Oh,
and the three of us went and played at this like restaurant that was in the Ford dealership. So it was like weird. We were like in the display room, and we played music, and like nobody came to dinner that night. It was just like us and the restaurant staff.
was
And it
I
was like,
there?
You were there. I swear you were there. I'll have to confirm with Brandon that you were there, but, like, it was, like, this
Maybe I
little
was. I don't know.
Italian restaurant, and anyway, we just did
That's
weird
crazy.
stuff like that, you
So
know?
much weird stuff.
And, yeah,
All the
again,
dances, everything,
uh,
the plays.
dances, plays, yeah. It There were so many things that looking back, I'm like, I cringe at some things, right? Like putting on
Mhm,
pantyhose to be in a Mitchell backyard theater production
mhm.
and a powdered wig and stuff like that.
Yep.
But at the same time, like there are so many little memories that are they're fun, right? It's just we had fun growing up and especially by the time we were in high school and we got licenses, we just kind of got to do whatever we wanted. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember
Yeah.
it being early in the morning and being like, yeah, we're just gonna like we already did school. Like I did school last
Yeah.
night. Let's go have fun. And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah.
Mm.
I wanted to
I
tell one other story about you and see if
Yeah.
you remembered this. Was that for your 18th birthday, a friend of ours,
Mm.
Kevin Rapp, put together a surprise party for you, and we came
Oh,
and kidnapped
yeah.
you in the morning. And there's a picture. I'll see if I can find it and I'll probably post it on the Instagram, but it was like we look like a band. Like your house was like being redone or something. So there's like plastic wrap everywhere and someone shot it from the balcony. So it's like down on all of us and we're all just standing there. And we took you out to breakfast. And I don't remember what else we went and did, but still one of my like favorite memories of like the boys going out and having fun and hanging out
Mm.
for a birthday. So
That
anyway.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what the waitress said to us?
I do remember she asked us if we were gonna go buy you, like, smokes and porn and scratchers,
Mhm.
and we were
Yeah.
like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Because we were good
Dude,
Christian boys.
yep. Just the amount of awkward silence at that table that was so tangible when she asked that question was so awesome. Like, I
Yes.
remember that. I'll remember that forever. I was just like, she's trying to be funny, like talking to a table of boys, asking if they're gonna buy some porn or whatever, and we're all just like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, you spoke the devil's words, like
So funny.
yeah,
Also,
super,
who's
super
buying
funny.
porn?
Yeah, exactly, it's free on the
Even at
internet,
that
guys.
point.
Come
Yeah.
on. Uh,
So
I've
funny.
got a couple more questions for you. I know we're running a little bit over time, but, I was gonna ask you, so based on your experience being a homeschool kid, growing up with it, would you, if you have kids someday, would you think about homeschooling your kids? Would you send them to private school, public school?
I really don't know. I think that would be something I'd have to consider deeper as I got to it. I think the idea of should anybody homeschool their kids, more from like a philosophical standpoint, is much more interesting. I trust myself, and so if I was to homeschool my kids, I would hope I would do a good job. But I'm also like I just love learning on my own, and so I would love to teach my kids. But we all know, like we've all met certain types of people in the world. God bless them, and they just maybe shouldn't be teaching their kids very much because maybe they didn't learn very much in school. You know what I mean, or something like that. Like I saw an Instagram reel the other day, and it was this lady, and she homeschools her kids, and her method of homeschooling, her kid I think is 5 or 6. Her method of homeschooling is to not teach them, and whenever they ask a question about something, that's like the learning experience for the day. And so they're not learning any organized school. I think one kid's 7 and one's 5. And so like they just don't know anything about anything. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to do math. Like the 7-year-old's like just now like learning how to add and subtract. And I'm like, so that person's ruining their kids. Like that's just what they're doing, right? And how many people are going to do that in the world? More than need to, probably. But at the same time, we live in such an age that if you wanted to homeschool your kids, you could do a fantastic job. Like it would be hard to argue. It would be really hard to argue that you couldn't do a better job than the school systems that are available, even private school systems. 100%, like an intelligent person could do a much better job. Anybody who's working one-on-one with a child, like for half of a day, can do a better job than a kid going to school. Like it just sucks to go to school for 7 hours and come home and have 3 hours of homework, and that's just your entire day. when you could have had one-on-one time with someone all day long and done all of your school in 3 hours and learned way more. And especially when it's tailored to your own like learning style. So it's inarguable that it's not better. Like, it is better. But do we trust human beings to teach each other? Legally, yes. Do I trust myself? I think I do. But I'd probably ruin my kids in some way as well. But I mean, so are other teachers too. So I don't know. It's a question I'd have to ask myself once I actually had a kid and wanted to teach them. I would right now say, if you made me choose, like, am I going to homeschool my future kids? I would say I would do some kind of charter school where they go to school a couple days a week so they can at least not be a super weirdo, but I can also teach them at the same time. I'd probably choose some kind of hybrid like that at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also answered my next question, which was like, what encouragement would you give parents if they are thinking about homeschooling? And I mean, you kind of answered it. It's like, if you're going to do it, like, the resources to do it really well are just there. But, you know,
So much
that
more
being
than when our
said,
parents were doing it. So much more.
100%. Yeah,
Like,
100%.
I remember our moms meeting up for like park days and stuff and being like, I found this curriculum. It's so good. Like, try it out. And then hand each other like the papers. And you're like, now you just download it on the internet or like watch a YouTube video, find the series on a website or something that you got to pay a little bit of money for. But you can find super like well accredited stuff. You could even teach your kid college level stuff. Like, there are so many different universities that give away classes for free. And so much of the first 2 years of college is just the same thing you did in high school anyway. And so it would be so easy to find the resources you need. So if you wanted to homeschool your kid, so easy nowadays. If you're actually motivated and interested in giving your kid a good education, you could do a really good job. The friend side of it, the social awareness aspect of it, that would be a harder thing to deal with than the education side, when I think it used to be the other way around.
It's hard because COVID threw everything into a loop of like the isolation, and people have separated themselves a lot. However, there are still really strong homeschool communities that exist all over the country, all over the world. And I know where we grew up, there was Achieve was the one. It was the one that we were all a part of, and they were super strong, and they did do events and things that pushed kids to be in community with each other. We still were socially awkward, caterpillars waiting to be hatched, but we at least had some human interaction outside of, when you do meet a kid that has never had social interaction outside of mom, dad, siblings, it's, you can tell. So that's the other thing is, like, one, if you're thinking about homeschooling your kid, the education to give them, like you said, the best education possible, it's at your fingertips. But two, find that community to give your kids the opportunity to go out into the world and be socially adjusted, know how to interact with people, know how to interact with, in any circumstance in life, right? You have the ability to do that. So all that being said, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
I
loved it.
appreciated catching up with you. And is there anything else you want to leave the people with? Anything you want to shout out? Let the people know.
Yeah. Man, homeschooling, it was a trip. People ask me sometimes, would you do it all again if you had the choice, like, to have your parents homeschool you or not homeschool you? And I struggle with that question all the time. I think I would have thrived a lot more and had some less anxiety socially if I went to a normal public school. But at the same time, I would have probably had so many other problems that I would have had to deal with. And so it's kind of just like a, tit for tat kind of thing. I don't think I would change anything. I mean, I am who I am, and I have strengths and weaknesses based off of how I was raised, as does everybody. And I like who I am, and I'm satisfied with the gifts that I've been given and how I was raised. So I don't think I would change anything. It would be interesting. Like, I'd for sure play a lot more sports. I would have for sure done different things socially and all that kind of stuff. But I liked my childhood. I liked meeting you and being friends and all the other friends that I had. So I think I would keep it the same. If you gave me a genie and said you get to choose, it would be nice to experience, just so I could kind of, compare and contrast and tell people what to do. But hey, this is the life that we have, and it's been a good one so far with its cons and its pros. We're just trying to make the best of it.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming on the show. For anyone listening, this is episode 2, 3. I don't know. I don't know when this is coming out yet. It's coming out next month, July sometime. But
Cool.
like, subscribe, rate, review, all the good things. You already know what to do. And yeah, if there's anything you want to know about homeschooling, send me a comment, send me a DM, whatever you got to do, because I want to get it answered for you. So this has been the Ex-Homeschoolers Club, and until next time, we'll see ya.